Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural. We're so excited to have you join us each and every Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We thank you for tuning in and being a part of our show, sharing it out, giving us your feedback, your commentary. We appreciate you and thank you for being here. It is the day before Thanksgiving. So, those who celebrate the holiday, I'm sure you're prepping and preparing for the way in which you acknowledge this time. I know that there's a lot of conversation about what this holiday really means, but for the time that you get away from work or work related activities, I pray that you stay safe and well and enjoy friends and family. We've been through a lot in these last 2 years, so I believe that every day is a day to give thanks and to be thankful. So hopefully you're doing the same. Hey, Richard, great to see you. Thank you for always being here and joining the show. But before we get started, we have a lot to talk about today, and we know there's some breaking news. We will get to that, but I want to give our legal experts an opportunity to greet you as well. So, Mr. Russell, over to you.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Another blessed day that we have. And I can't wait till we get the show started. It's a lot of teachable moments that I'm glad that you're tuning in. And if you can't make it live, hopefully you get the recap because the information you will take with you forever. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. And Senor Pachado.
Hello, good afternoon, buenas tardes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Speaking Legally. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am certain that you're going to find the information on this show this afternoon to be fulfilling as well as educational. So, welcome once again.
Absolutely. So, we have a practice that we've been doing over this past year, acknowledging when we have someone transition into being an ancestor. And we know that we heard about the untimely transition of our dear Malcolm X. We know what he represents to our community. His daughter, Malika Shabazz, was found dead in her home. And I know they're still looking into what actually happened. She was 56, which is relatively young. And she was, they don't know what happened. They're saying it's suspicious, they're investigating, but we definitely want to send our condolences out to the family as they've been through so much and continue to go through so much publicly that we pray she rest in power.
Yeah, I mean, when I read this, I was, of course, taken aback because, her father, Malik Al Shabazz, represented so much to me. I mean, he was responsible for changing the course of my life. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X as a freshman in college, and it took me into a whole different direction and mindset after reading that book in terms of my identity, my Black identity, and my politics. And so, I recognize her as being part of a very powerful bloodline. And, I see this as a tremendous loss to our community. Luckily, you know, uh, uh,
Well, I think Ed might be having some difficulties. Do you hear him, Dr. Grant?
And no, he's frozen at the moment, but we'll give
Well,
him a second to recalibrate. But what would you like to share as he comes back on?
Well, one, I think is ironic that her death is coincides with the um, the finding that the two men that were also associated with her father's death, the finding that they were actually set up, that they were not guilty, that their pleas, their sentencing, everything was vacated because the person that was truly involved was, let's say, coerced by the government to lie. That is my understanding of it. And therefore, years and years later, based upon once again folks in the media doing investigative work and digging and digging and digging, and having the Innocent Project fight for these two men, and now it's come out that they were not involved in Malcolm X's death, and that just happened just a week ago. and now you have her death. I echo some of the sentiments that Ed was relaying in reference to his importance to the community. Um, Often we think about Martin Luther King and nonviolence and Malcolm X. Even though he didn't stand for violence 100% of the way, he stood for assertiveness. He stood for having a stiff back. He stood also for love of humankind. But he was not going to be abused by any means, and that was a pivotal point and a pivotal teachable moment, and something that I garnish and have with me and hold with me, that it's okay to move around a little bit, but don't shove me. That's not going to happen. And we all know what he meant to the movement. And history would probably never bring someone like that, of that magnitude, of that humanity, of that complexity, that truthfulness. You want to talk about a truth teller? He was one, and I'm sure he instilled that principles within his family. I'm saddened in the fact that he gave his life to our community, so therefore their family, his daughter in particular, growing up mostly without her father because he's out there for the cause. That is sad, but I'm thankful for his sacrifice. Condolences to the family. I'm sure her daughter will live. Her daughter will live on in her grandfather's stead, and her mother's will and tough and tenacity. And really, my condolences to the family.
And when I think about the fact that she was in utero when her father was murdered, and came into this world with such trauma, you can only imagine what her entirety of her experience has been, learning from her siblings about her father, watching her mother continue to hold up the work. And you just never know all of the pieces that contribute to the life that we live. And my heart just really goes out to the family, because it's been so much that they've had to endure since the murder of Malcolm X, and then losing her mom. It's just been a lot back to back. I know her older sister was just recently inducted into Delta Sigma Theta sorority as an honorary member. So to come from that high of the weekend to get this news, I definitely am sending love and prayers out, as we said, to the family. And Ed, I know you wanted to share some more before we move on.
Well, I just think about the tragedy that has beset this family. Now, I'm not sure if the nephew or the grandson of Betty was Malika's son, but I remember his, when he died, I believe it was in Mexico. That was tragic. And even before his death, the setting of the fire that caused the death of Betty Shabazz, it's just been, one thing after another. So, to see this, it's just tragic upon tragic, just really sad.
Absolutely. So we will definitely keep them in prayer, and as
And
well as.
one more
Mhm.
thing. I'm sorry. I don't know if you mentioned while I had my technical problems, the recent exoneration of the two gentlemen who had been in prison. So yeah. So
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
Yeah, yeah. Mr. Russell mentioned that, the irony that that happened, alongside this news story. So definitely a lot to digest. And we know that the holidays can also be just difficult on its own for so many people who lost loved ones
Yeah.
throughout the pandemic, even before the pandemic. So we're sensitive to the fact that it's not always a joyous celebration for everyone. So we're sensitive to that. And, we just hope wherever you are on the spectrum of celebrating or not celebrating, that that we're sending love. And then we had some tragedy hit closer to home, someone that we have been able to know, and Mr. Russell worked with. I had the pleasure of meeting him through Mr. Russell, as well as
I love the
Mr. Machado.
community that I live in. And I would be a stand up guy when I see other police officers not doing what's right. And that's why I would become a police officer.
That's a clip from a PSA, and I'm going to put a photo up of him, or just pause on his story. That's Michael Thomas Sr.,
a
and
living,
he
and I
transitioned this past week, and it was news that hit everybody like, wow, life is not guaranteed, but he had an impact, and he gave his life really for the cause of being able to, not only in his career, but post that, advocate for the rights of people in our community. So, Mr. Russell, I know you wanted to say some words as well for Michael Thomas Sr.
Yeah, I mean, this brother was a really really good brother. He he was employed with the Department of Corrections. He served his he called it time, right? So I'm gonna use his words. He served his time as a correction officer and served it well and retired. And a lot of people don't really see correction officers living a life of service, but they do live a life of service. They live a life of service and a life of protection because their responsibilities and duties are to service those who are incarcerated. And you can do that with style and grace, or you can do that with malice and bad intentions in your heart. And he did that respectfully. He did that with style and grace. But then also, he was a service to the community because he protected the community for those that were rightfully incarcerated, and try to educate them at the same time. And then the ultimate give your flowers moment is that after he retired, he continued his work in the community as a person doing workshops on know your rights, right in the alley of cardiac arrest, how to handle unlawful police stops. He introduced me to certain segments of the community that I wasn't familiar with. And not only did he do that, see, it's one thing to call an attorney up or call a friend up and say, a good friend of mine or somebody down the block or a mother that I know, their son got falsely arrested. That's one thing. If you do that, you already get an A plus plus, as they say, for those who practice the martial arts, just for doing that. But to have the wherewithal and the heart to stay committed to that person throughout the process, call you up and say, hey, I saw brother X. I know you have a case with him. He was on the block doing ABC. You need to have a talk with him. Or did brother X make it to his appointment today? Or I'm going to bring them down to the appointment. Or I'm doing the workshop and I want you to come and join me in this workshop to perform this workshop. Or there's a workshop going on and I can't make it. I want you to go. Or let's create a workshop for you. Or show up at a rally anytime, any place. You want me there? I'm there. His dedication to what's right, his dedication to making sure that justice is served in whichever way it could happen, and his truth telling. He was a truth teller in that if you're wrong, you're wrong. He often said, you can be strong all you want, but if you're wrong, you're wrong. And if you're right, then I'll stand by your side. Just an amazing individual. I can't say enough about him. He knew a lot of people, from our new mayor that is going to be installed this upcoming year, Eric Adams, to you name it, the guy who played in the tournament, Soul in the Hole, who no longer plays anymore. He knew that guy from top to bottom. There's just not enough information that I can give about him. There, we stood together right there. This is a Treywick Kowalski, Kowalski Treywick matter. He came on out for that. That's in front of one police plaza. He would never shy away from what was wrong and what needed to be done to make things right in our community. So condolences to his family. I could spend a whole show talking about him.
Yeah, my condolences as well. I was, I was blessed to be able to spend at least a little bit of time with him at the Kenneth P. Thompson street naming. He showed up at that event, and we got to speak to him and break some bread, and always where he needed to be. So, may you rest in power, my brother.
Absolutely. And I just remember his excitement when you released cardiac arrest and just his real support. Like he wanted to make sure that it was in the hands of everyone in the community because he knew the value in the work and in the message. So definitely as well, rest in power, Michael Thomas Sr., class act, real upstanding and just his heart. Some people just have that energy where they're about it for real, for real. They're not just talking it, they're living it. So I feel blessed that I had an opportunity to know him. And as we move through the show now, talking about what has happened recently in the news, we'll start with the one that had us all scratching our heads. Some people said, well, I really wasn't shocked at this outcome, but I was still hoping that justice would have been served. But we see what happened, that Rittenhouse was acquitted on all charges. What say you, my legal experts?
Well, I'm just going to set the platform and say this, that we could spend a lot of time talking about what the acquittal means as far as social justice, what it means in reference to folks on the other side of the aisle supporting what's right in society, Black Lives Matter. But I want to set aside that for another day, because that's more of the culture. And I think what is presented with this trial here and what took place in this trial is a variety of teachable moments that we've discussed in the past, seeing it act out in real time. And so I want to spend a little time with that, and I'll lead. One, we've always talked about knowing your position in life and the power that you have, the power to vote. This was a judge that has been on the bench for 25 years. And the reason why I'm focusing on the judge is because the judge is like the referee, the umpire, the non-biased, the impartial person that sets the tone of what's going to go on in the courtroom. Make sure nobody's cheating. Make sure everybody is focused. Make sure all prejudice and biases are outside the door of the courtroom. And from what I saw, he really didn't do that. He didn't do that at all. And why is that important? Because jurors are taking direction from the person that they think is impartial, the person they think is the lead. Is like having a teacher in front of the classroom. Your best friend can know the same thing as the teacher who's sitting right next to you and say, hey, divide that by 3 and subtract that by 4. And you might believe him, but it doesn't become valid until that teacher up there says, yeah, divide this by 3 and subtract it by 4. Then you're like, all right, you know what you're talking about. And so jurors look to the judge to kind of get that signal of that they're in a place that they're protected. They're in a place where prejudice and biases are kept, and stereotypes are kept outside of the courtroom. And from what I've read, I don't think that happened here. And the reason why I want to start there is because there's a couple of things that we talked about on Speaking Legally, before. One is that we talked about it's better to know thy judge than to know the law. And I'll reiterate, it's better to know thy judge than to know the law. Why is that important? Because the law can be secondary to who you're in front of. If that judge has an agenda, then that judge is smart enough to manipulate the law or make sure he does enough things that the law is not harmed in a way that causes a reversal or mistrial or any issues on appeal, and also gets his agenda or her agenda across. Now, this judge, Judge Schroeder, I believe his name was, or his name is, Schrader.
I think it's Schrader's the way it's
Schrader? All right, Bruce Schrader. He was known in that state, in that courtroom, that no defendants wanted to go in front of him. Lawyers are like, nope, I'm not going in that courtroom. So that means he's a pro prosecutor judge. That means he leans more towards the prosecution. That was the word on the street, if you would say, that I've read from various media outlets, that was his profile. So you would think that he would help the prosecution. Well, that didn't necessarily happen in this case. And we're going to get into dividing what is emotion and what is reality and some of the things he did. But overall, that didn't help in this case. So that's number one. Number two, we've also talked about on this show, your participation in the vote. Now, he was appointed at first, but after that, he had to be elected. And he was elected at least 6 times over the last 25 years. And every time he's elected, he had the ability to stay on the court for 6 years. So you do the math. That means he was on the bench a long time, and that means people were checking off that they want him again, or they weren't checking anything. They just bypassed it, and so therefore, here he is back on the bench. That's more of a shame on us type of deal. That's a shame on us, right? Versus a shame on him, right? And so, someone mentioned an arbitrator. I'm not going to really go into what they said, but as a trial attorney, knowing thy judge is the rule that you want to abide by. As an arbitrator, because I sit as an arbitrator myself, I am the trier of all the law. I dictate what happens. This judge dictates what happens. The jurors, they are the kings and queens of the facts, how they perceive the facts, what they take, what they think is important. However, if the judge precludes certain facts from coming in, then you may not have much to work with. And Ed, I'll let you take the floor, but there are plenty of examples that we want to dive into where we can have teachable moments.
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm a continuous proponent of our people paying attention to who is running for the bench, because in many cases that will be a person who will have much more direct impact on your life or the life of your loved ones than any other person on the ticket, any other council person, in some places alderman, congressperson, whatever the case may be. Usually the judge, district attorney, those are people that are really, really going to have that impact on your life. And this is a perfect example. However, knowing this area, meaning the county of Kenosha, I know it to be a very conservative area. And I would say that this judge fits within the profile of the majority of those who live in that area. The Black community in Kenosha is small. Also small is the Black community in the county north, Racine, which is where I started out practicing law. I used to always be concerned traveling through these communities, because I knew how conservative law enforcement was in these communities and how small the Black community and the communities of color were in these areas. So I was always concerned. And also with the how the law was treated and observed by those in power. In this case here, this judge seemed to be display some level of favor for the defense here. I do know though that the defense attorney on this case, Mark Richards, has a reputation of being one of, if not one of the best criminal defense litigators in that area. He used to practice, or at the time that I was there, he was known for that in Racine and Kenosha. I've also read that
And then he didn't need any help. Then that's what you're saying.
Well, but what I was about to mention beyond that, the amount of resources that he had at his disposal was, damn near limitless. In fact, I've read that they were able to do practice trial runs, at least I believe 2. And they had, an expert that they were able to hire with respect to the selection of the jury. Most criminal defendants, even the most well-resourced, it takes a certain amount of money to be able to perform such, exercises prior to trial, and he was, the amount of funding he got from white ring groups around the country was tremendous. He was able to get bailed out, by these groups. I mean, today, in fact, I believe he paid a visit, or was accepted for a visit at Mar-a-Lago by the ex-president. So, that speaks to this young man being a cause celeb for, the right-wing movement in this country, and the amount of resources that were placed at his disposal in terms of the defense. You look at, but with all that aside, that shouldn't have, prompted this judge to behave in the manner that he did, but yet he did. One of the biggest issues I saw in this case was when the judge dismissed the gun charge against him. And why do I say that? I say that because all along throughout this case, with the self-defense theory that the defense was putting on behalf of Rittenhouse, I kept saying to myself, well, it's either going to fall apart in terms of matching the lethality, the lethal force he applied to these unarmed victims, or the fact that he was already in the wrong by carrying this weapon illegally. At the time, he was 17, and my understanding is that at the age of 17, he wasn't allowed to carry this long gun, but somehow the judge found the law did not apply to him, was to a certain degree ambiguous, and ended up dismissing it when it came. And my understanding was the prosecution was arguing that, wait a minute, what you're trying to apply here is something that applies in cases where you're talking about a person of his age carrying a long gun during hunting, or in the process of hunting, not on an urban street during a demonstration. So,
well, I mean,
just
you
amazing.
take issues like that, right? And I don't want to get too entrenched in the details for our viewers, but I mean, look, we're gonna learn today, as they say. We're gonna learn today, right? There's processes for that, right? The prosecution can appeal the court's decision in dismissing that charge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that can be argued while the case is going on. So, whether or not the prosecution did that or not, that's an indication of the conservatism that you're talking about. Now, when you spoke about conservative, yeah, it's a conservative place, but it's conservative in that defendants don't like to be there. It's not conservative, so prosecutions get the hard end of the stick. So I just want to make sure that we understand how the conservative label is being used in this particular venue. Now, it's conservative in that, look, white is right. Then I get what you're saying, right?
Well, that's precisely what I'm saying. I'm saying that the conservative mindset here was applied in his favor based on him being young, white, and the fact that he was serving in the interests of right wing.
Oh no, look.
In here.
I 100%.
I mean, he's in there serving as some sort of with these paramilitary guys who shouldn't have been allowed to be there in the first place.
I get that 100%.
By law enforcement.
I get that 100%.
I mean, listen, you're not. This is for any person of color who thinks that now they can run around. No, rifle. I would caution them and say you are not going to be treated the same way.
I think people of color know where they can run around with guns with, and it is definitely not in Wisconsin in the street. All right, you want to talk about Madison, South Side of Chicago? That's a whole nother thing, but it is not that. But I mean, what you speak about is the things that we can't touch, the things that we know it exists, but we can't fight. That's one piece. But today, right now, what I'm speaking to is a thing that we can touch and a thing that we can speak to, because now we know that we need to pay attention to electing who, what, when, and where to what positions, because this judge right here, some of the outrageous things he did, and I'm not talking about arguing with the prosecution, basically calling the, in front of the jury, you're brazen, using terms like that, that's normal course, Judges have said many things to me about how I approach things, and I like the judge, and I thought the judge was a fair judge. You can have your opinion, you can spin that any which way you want to if you're a good trial attorney. But if you tell me as a prosecutor, and all my experience as being a prosecutor, that I can't use the term victim for the people that are deceased, then a red flag goes up.
Yeah.
Now. If he had a history of, whenever you're in my courtroom, we can't use terms like victim, because it's overduly prejudiced, then I'm with you. I haven't read any reports that said that that was his mindset overall, that he shied away, he shied from terminology that lend itself to certain biases. I'm all for that. I don't want to have somebody called a defendant, because that means you're defending against charges that's brought against you. I don't want to be known as defense. You want to call me accused? Somebody's accusing me of something? I live with that. But defending means something totally different. He didn't have that history. So right then, the red flag jumps up when he says we're not going to use the word victim. What? That's not the conservatives that I'm used to, right? The conservative I'm used to is that you can use whatever word you want to make sure that this defendant goes to jail, white, black, or indifferent. Make sure this person goes to jail.
One thing we know about conservatives is that they are some of the most contradictory people that on the planet. The terminology that they use, they use it whenever it suits them. When it doesn't suit them, they come up with other things. And we've watched it happen over the course of this last year. You know, stop the steal. Steal what? You know,
right.
I mean,
right.
You know, the spin masters all the way. No, but, they weren't victims here. You know what?
Right.
Victims?
So now the prosecution is precluded from using the word victim. We could do whatever sport. We could do baseball or we could do football as far as 3 strikes, 4 downs. But I'm counting them off. That's one right there. That's a strike or that's a down loss. You know, for those who are sports fans, something's wrong with that. You tell me I can't use the word victim. Then you're going to tell me that the defendant can use the word term looters, or use the term as rioters, or use the term of instigators if they can prove that to be true. Now, let me see. A trial is about proving things. So at what point can I use it to prove or to be able to say that the victims in this case was something other than victims? Do I get one guy to get up there and say, yeah, they were looting and they were stealing, they were running around? Bingo, I got it. Now I can call them looters. And now I can use that terminology to kind of shape the image of those who are dead as people doing something wrong, which now shapes the mindset that, oh, well, he was doing something right and they was doing something wrong. That's strike 2. Strike 3, defense is bringing in an expert on use of force. This is what this case is about to a certain degree, use of force. We're not going to go in deeper and talk about black sympathizer or conservative politics. I'm just going to stay just on neutral ground, because I think the teachable moment can be illustrated by staying on neutral ground. So they bring in an expert. This expert happens to be a veteran. It is Veteran Day. Now, unless this judge has a history of, if there's a holiday, he wants the jurors to recognize the holiday. That means the day after Martin Luther King birthday or the day before, if somebody's on trial, we want to stand up and recognize Martin Luther King or Malcolm X's birthday, then I'm with it. I haven't read anything that said that. So the fact that he had jurors and implied to jurors that we should stand up and clap for the veterans of this country, when he knows that the next witness for the defense side is a veteran and is going to testify that he is a veteran when he goes through his CV, when he goes through his resume as to why he's an expert in use of force, that is strike 3. And then you get the strike 4 or 4th down, if you want to say that in reference to football versus baseball, is that now he's talking about, and let me just preface. I often say when I do workshops as far as cardiac arrest, and I talk about unlawful stops, and I talk about police officers, I usually is a chapter that I dedicate to our audience and to those that have purchased, that I say police are people too. And what do we mean by that? They have biases, they have all this baggage. You just can't look at a title and just think that they are something that is not human. They are just as human as anyone else, and they're going to do things that you're going to find to be flawed, and because they're human, right? So I get that. So now let's catapult that to judges. Judges are people too. So what do I mean by that? As a person, as a teacher, as a lawyer, as a judge, as you name it, when you're in front of an audience, you want to develop a relationship. You want to develop some communication, something where they buy into you so they can follow you, especially a judge. You want to develop that relationship that, look, nothing is going on in this courtroom unless I want it. You guys take orders from me, and I'm going to be fair and I'm going to be impartial, and I need the jurors to know that, so you follow me. So I say all that to say this, that I don't have an issue with him trying to relate to the jurors. He might tell a funny joke one day. Judges do that all the time. They may come in and say, you know what? We had an eclipse last night. The Knicks beat the Lakers. I don't know what the joke is, but it might be something like that, just to get the jurors to say, oh my God, you know what? Yeah, I did see that, Or, last week was a regular Sunday because Miami kicked the living beep, beep, beep out of the Jets. Whatever it is to create the scenario where there is communication. But when you start talking about the falling of Rome, and you start to start to reveal your position as far as politics is concerned, to bring the jurors over to your side, these are all things that should not be in the courtroom, are issues that show lack of judicial discretion, definitely appealable. So our viewers understand, when you get acquitted, you can't appeal. It's only when you get convicted. So there's nothing to appeal here. It's not like the prosecution can say, hey, look, this judge acted in this fashion. We want to do the trial over. If they do that, it only means that the judge doesn't get reseated next year. But it's over, folks. It's done. And he knows this. And so because he knows this and he puts it out there, he is leading one point. Let me just share something real quick. I'm sorry to hog up the mic, but let me just share something. Look, in my profession, I think therapy is great. I go to a therapist, right? Personal and professionally. I suggest everybody go do it. We talked about mental health here a lot of times. But one of the things my therapist said is that, and it's funny because it's a little twist on something that we hear all the time. We hear, you could bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. We all know what that means, right? Mm-hmm. He puts a twist on it. He says, you could bring a horse to water, but you can't drown him. I'm like, what the hell? Right? But you think about that. Horses in water do not jive. You damn sure can bring a horse to water, but you're never going to drown him. It's just never going to happen. This judge's trying to relate in the fashion that he was trying to do so shows that he had a certain agenda, and it was more than just trying to relate. And he was bringing a horse to the water, and he was forcing that horse to drink or drown. The sad thing about it, getting back to your point about conservative, is that the jurors didn't care. They like, drown me, baby. Drink, make me drink. I'm with you. You doing the heavy lifting. I could just stand behind you and hide. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, the outcome of this trial is it's very, very disappointing. The application of the law, the evidence that was excluded, the behavior of the judge, just absolutely disappointing. I mean, but not unexpected.
Ed, what I would tell you, what is unexpected is this. I represent a lot of people a lot of times, federal and state. This one picture I saw, they were watching the video of what Kyle did when he executed those folks. Mm-hmm. My words, when he executed those folks. And what's so curious about the video, about this picture, is that the judge is watching it, defense counsel is watching it. You can't really see where the prosecutor is. And Kyle Rittenhouse, whatever his name is, I don't even want to remember it. He was standing bent over as if he was whispering in the judge's left ear. because I had to think about what ear it was. Actually, yeah, left ear, bent over, right over the judge, watching the video. How many defendants you know? I'm sitting right here. Just imagine him over my left side looking into this camera. How many defendants you know and has his hand on the arm, on the back part of the chair, has his arm there, folded, has his arms folded like this. He's right over my shoulder right here. We're looking forward. He's not distance away. Defense counsel's on the other side. He's right here.
Because
Up close and personal.
listen, the affinity is there. That judge looked at that young man. That's my son. That's my nephew. That's my grandson. That's one of mine. You know. Now you come into that courtroom as a defendant. I'm fairly certain he's not going to want to be within 6 feet of you. Okay,
Which
he's going to
is
perceive you to be less than human. Trust me.
And if we can't use the word victim, right, in this case, so when we have a rape case, so we can't use the word victim. The person that has been raped, what we call that person, the person that's been raped, like what terminology we give that person. That's how far-reaching his decision was, because
incredible.
you're just gonna call him complaining witness. And
Yeah,
then one of
the complainant.
Right. And one of the other things, right? I said 3 strikes, and then I said 4 downs, right? So this is basketball. This is 2 shots and a technical foul. So here's a technical foul in basketball terms, right? They have to find a substitute juror. I'm not questioning why they had to find a substitute juror. It happens in trials. There's no conspiracy theory behind that. This happens in trials. Some jurors bow out. I'm not up in arms about the judge trying to relate to the jurors. That's what everybody should try to do. They should try to relate to the jurors. I think what he was doing was in bad taste and how he was trying to do that. I think when he says, okay, what we having for today, lunch? We have an Asian food. Oh my God, I hope it doesn't take long for it to get here. Implying,
I remember that one. Yeah,
right,
that was
right. I mean, we're in the era where we're talking about hate crimes against Asians. I mean, that's made national news. So, bad taste, right? Not necessarily what we call reversible, definitely bad taste. But when you start adding up all the tea leaves, then you get to the stage of, bias and reversible, right? Should come back, but you can't do it for an acquittal, right? But you start to see what he's all about. And so this is the technical foul shot, the 5th down, the 4th strike, if you want to call it, when they have to pick an alternate.
Oh, and he allowed him to pick
the defendant. He's going in the wheel to pick the alternate. Now, I would tell you, of all the jobs that people have in the courtroom. So now let me backtrack, because I think I went a little fast with this. Ladies and gentlemen, when this is an old-fashioned way. When jurors are picked, you have the jurors in the box, and you usually have alternates, right? In some states, what happens is that the alternates are numbered. Alternate 1, 2, 3, and 4. You might have 4 of them. So when someone has to drop out or disqualified, it is no controversy. Alternate 1 takes the spot. Some states, cities don't do it that way. They have alternates. If someone drops out, then you kind of pick which alternate you want to. There could be a hearing as to that. Both sides gets a chance to question all over, kind of boom, pick that person. Happens fairly quickly. That's one way. Or the judge takes the names, throw them in a barrel. I mean, a literal bingo barrel, a wheel. And the clerk puts their hand in and picks out the juror. Why the clerk? 2 things. Clerk is part of the judge's team. The judge is impartial. The judge is not biased. So therefore, the clerk follows that, not biased. I'm going to go in here and just pick whoever. I have no nickel in this quarter. I don't know, Kyle. I'm not part of this family. I'm just a clerk. I'm going to pick it. Boom. One of the highlights of a clerk's life. No offense, clerks. I know you do a lot of things, but in a major trial, you get a chance to pick that juror. You can write a book about this, right? What you felt like, how you were queasy, you didn't know what name you were going to pick. However, that's the clerk of the court's job to do that. No.
You know what this case reminds me
Wait, wait,
of?
wait, wait, hey, wait. Not in this case. I want to make sure I finish for our viewers. Not in this case. What happens? The wheel is taken off the bench. Nothing is ever removed from the judge's bench. Are you kidding me? Nothing ever leaves there. The wheel is taken off the judge's bench. It is brought to the defendant's table. Then the defendant spins it around, or maybe somebody else, but I thought I saw his hand spinning around. And then the defendant goes in there and picks out that juror. Now,
Unbelievable.
If that doesn't show signs of what we say, what, if that doesn't show signs of what, then what are we talking about here?
Well, you know what this case reminds me of? This reminds me of when the Portland
Besides a bad dream?
Well, when the Portland Trailblazers were playing the LA Lakers in the Western Conference Finals in 2000, Game 7.
Right.
That was that you know, those referees there completely cheated the Blazers. I mean, that's what's happening here, you know.
And I would agree with you on that 100%. But the difference between this and now is that they were getting paid. Everybody walked away with $1 in a check, and that was it. And we ain't walking away with no $1 in a check. As a matter of fact, we're talking about it right now, trying to distinguish how we can prevent this from happening in the future.
Oh my God!
Exactly, and the family has to live with it. Gloria asked the question. She said she knows the answer, but white people have asked me, why do I place race in the discussion when it was white on white crime? Just submitting for discussion if you have not.
Listen, I've heard this before. I mean, I was part of a discussion on Facebook when I was very disappointed that somebody black who I went to undergrad with said, well, I would have done the same thing that Kyle Rittenhouse did, you know. And I was like, wait, how can you put yourself in this vacuum of space and not take into account everything else that was going on during that incident? That's what they want us to do. They want us to say, oh, well, it was a white person shooting a couple of other white people, so no big deal. Or why are you trying to bring race into it?
That's
Come on, give me a break. The protests themselves were occurring because this black man was shot in the back by these cops simply going to his car. You know, a domestic violence incident, had not been charged with anything yet or had not been convicted of anything, and he gets shot. And luckily he survives, although now he's paralyzed. So that happens. And then you have, you know, these protests, and you have a multiracial group of people who are angry about what happened to Brother Blake. And so now you have these vigilantes, these paramilitary unit, these peacekeepers, these radical right wingers show up in Kenosha. The police don't do anything about it. I can just imagine if the new Black Panther Party would have showed up there fully strapped, what would have happened. They wouldn't have been allowed to walk around there to protect businesses and so forth, or to protect the protesters. That's not what would have happened. And at the same time, and on the same token, if this young man would have been a young black man who would have been carrying an AR-15, I think it was, very lethal weapon, would have been walking around and had shot these people the way this young man did. They you know, I doubt it very strongly, 100%, that he would have been treated in the same way and would have gotten an acquittal, in fact.
And to your point, Ed, it goes back to, and I know, I guess who you know, Gloria Smith, who presented this, she says she knows the answer, but we'll use it as, once again, a teachable moment. It goes to thinking surface deep, right? Every case with police is not going to be black and white. There's going to be some other motivations behind it. It might be social economics. It might be just psychological. It might be power structure. It might be quota. There's something else that's behind it. So we got to move away from that kind of like, well, it was only white people and white people only kill white people, so I'm not involved. The profound thinking, the digging a little deeper is, all right, let's talk about the cause of what brought everybody together. Let's talk about the fact of failure to intervene. They knew what was going on. The police knew what was going on. I mean, that's the real thing. I mean, the real, you really want to talk about social justice is talk to the police and like, what were you doing? You're like, you're just by. You know,
that's a whole nother show.
You know, so I mean, yes. I hope
it
nobody's
continues.
just thinking just black and white, because that would be really, really shallow. It's all about black
Exactly.
and white.
Exactly. Hi, Aunt Joan. That's my Aunt Joan watching. It's a very interesting dialogue and good information. So, we can stay on Rittenhouse, but I appreciate the fact that you broke down for the audience exactly what we were seeing beyond the emotion of it, all the different foul plays that happened that wouldn't have necessarily happened. And it goes back again to what we talk about. It's important to participate in the process of electing judges, electing councilmen, electing assembly. This is so critical. Like, we can't drive this home where the legal meets the cultural. We can't just sit back and let things happen. So as we wrap up the show with this story that just hit the news prior to the show going live,
I'm
that
sorry, Dr. Grant. Dr. Grant, to the point that you made, I just got a notice to become a juror. So they better watch out. And then here I come. I'm coming.
yeah, they might end
I'm
up
coming.
disqualifying you when they look at your CV to be a juror. But we talked about the
Well, at
importance
least
of
they got to
being on
stand up and
jury.
clap when I come in the room, because that's expected nowadays. I want clapping. That's going to be the real deal.
Indeed. Well, at least we can end the show with some form of justice in this case of the three men convicted of the Ahmaud Arbery killing and murder. So let's break this down for our audience
I,
before we wrap up today.
I was very concerned about this case because during the selection of the jury, there were clear what they call Batson challenges in terms of the selection. I mean, you had an all 11 whites, one black person on that jury. I was like, oh my gosh, what is it? And the judge making a statement that there appeared to be some improprieties, but that he would allow the case to, continue forward, as if to say that, yeah, I see that there's some, legal issues here, but I'm just going to allow it to go forward this way. What would have happened if these men would have gotten acquitted? I mean, it's just, so I was concerned, but justice was served. I was extremely, extremely upset at the defense attorney's statement yesterday regarding Ahmaud Arbery and him being perceived as a victim, and talking about his I mean, the mother had to walk out of the courtroom quite understandably. Then you had the other defense attorney talking about, we don't want any more black pastors here. You don't hear folks saying that when you have a courtroom full of cops, when cops are on trial. I mean, this has been one to watch here. I'm just glad that justice was served in the end.
But we still have to wait for the sentencing.
Yeah, yep. That's true.
Well,
That's true.
I can
Let's
tell you,
wait and see.
I tell you a couple of things. One that had me concerned is that you see how people clean up very well, right? These men did not look like the way they look in courtroom in the day of the incident, and that's number one, right? So they clean up well. But I was confident in that we don't live in a vacuum, and I'm confident in that what happens in some areas shed lights, it impacts. I can't put my nail, I can't say it for true. I can't nail it down. But I think some folks were thinking about what happened in Wisconsin. What happened in what was it, Kenosha? What happened in reference to the Rittenhouse case? Some people were thinking about that. That happened before this verdict came out. I can't help to think about that. That's in people's minds and how they see the world. And folks stood up. Folks stood up because race relations, excessive force, mistreatment of people of color when it comes down to police, economic disadvantage when it comes down to people of color, brown and black, is only going to change when the other people on the side of the aisle buy into the change. And that's white folks. That's the only time it's going to change.
Well said. And, I'm curious to see how future cases unfold, because I thought it was so insulting. And, the clip was going viral around about, oh, we don't need any more black ministers. And, one is enough. Like, who? the unmitigated goal for the things that we continue to see happening over and over again. And then folks are looking like, why are y'all so upset? There's no bias. Like, what?
Well, well,
There's no problem. Everyone gets treated fairly in the court of law.
well, one of my biggest concerns actually is that, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I haven't been reviewing the news like I should be, but I haven't heard white clergy organizations denounce these statements and what was said during this trial by this defense attorney. If we're all supposed to be in fellowship, black and white, I want to see some of these white ministers
Well, this is what I'm saying.
stand up. I mean, this is disgraceful conduct in the public sphere.
It doesn't mean a thing unless the
No
other
one
people
should
are
feel
now
free to say such a thing.
Yeah.
And I want to see how much in fellowship.
You're not going, Ed. It happened already. It happened already. You're not going to see that. And
it's not too late.
Well, yes and no. It's never too late to recognize something. It's never too late to recognize something. It might be too late to recognize it in time and place that it needs to be recognized, but it's never too late.
Because we need to remember that the civil rights movement had quite the number of white clergy involved. And I find it shocking that, I mean, I haven't read any statements yet. Maybe I need to start looking, but
that's if they view them as clergy. That's if they view them as clergy.
That part.
If they view him as clergy, right? There are people out there that don't view him as clergy.
Well, it wasn't just Reverend Al Sharpton. There were other black clergy that attended.
I understand.
I mean, that's my concern. So
had those other reverends been there, it would not have been national news. It would have been right. Come on, Al turned the pendulum for defense counsel to speak about it.
Well, right. yeah, and I was listening to Reverend Al. I believe it was last Sunday. I think his Hour of Power, and where he invited other members of the clergy throughout the country to come down to the courthouse and do prayer outside of the courthouse and to join them. And I heard several calling in and saying that they were on their way down there. So, it definitely turned into a national movement. I want to see at the same time, white clergy say, listen, we support you, and we don't want to ever see anyone try to stop, any of us, including our black, fellow pastors and so forth, members of clergy, being barred from supporting an aggrieved family during a trial.
Well, I would say to what you're saying, and I'm finally going to fall into the line and use it. What is it? Spring hope is eternal. Hope spring. There you go. You know it. There
hope you go. Eternal.
That's right. I can't even get the words out because I don't even believe in it. You know what I mean?
Listen,
that's the dealio. Because what happens with that is that this, you can see it play out with your kids because they may have friends that are white and they may stick up for your son or your daughter in that moment. I guarantee you, as time goes on and the stakes run higher professionally, you name it, the ability to stand up for little Ed, little Royce, little Dr. Grant becomes more and more less of a reality because now somebody got to eat that steak, bro. And you know what? I deserve that steak. And if you're vegan, I deserve that, that vegetable, or pescatarian, I deserve that fish. And somebody's going to get knocked out.
Well, I'm not meaning to convey that we simply rely on that support, because I think this trial was an example of what happens when we mobilize and we organize. Remember, these individuals spent 2 months not being charged for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery until we started to organize. That mother said, wait a minute, something happened to my son, and I want an investigation. And folks started calling and going down there and saying, what the hell happened to Ahmaud?
Hence you have
and then eventually the authorities started feeling the pressure. and they started saying, "Oh
Right.
snap, we done effed up here. We need to
Absolutely.
start
And
providing some answers as to what happened to
absolutely.
this young man." And then the the layers of that onion started to get peeled until they got to the core and
And
started
the truth.
figuring out what the hell really happened, and these men ended up on trial. So
Absolutely. And as a black mother with two sons, she did exactly what I would have done. And that's why we have to keep the volume high when it
yeah,
comes to being
yeah,
involved in the pressure. So great way for us to end the show today, because we know we can get into it because we're passionate about this work. But speaking legally, where the legal meets the cultural, breaking down what's happening in real time. What does this mean, and how does it come back to all the lessons that we keep sharing on this show? So I want to thank our legal experts, Royce Russell Esquire, Edward Pichardo Esquire, for their intellectual property that they so freely share with us each and every week as we go through these cases. Rest in power again to Malika Shabazz, as well as Michael Thomas Sr. And we wish you safety. We wish you blessing, and be thankful for life. Life is a gift. We don't know how long we have on this planet, but while we're here, let's let every day count, not just the Thanksgiving holiday, but every day. And we're grateful for you being here. Final words, gentlemen, before we close out today.
happy Thanksgiving to everyone, you and your family.
Give thanks, give praise. See you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a great holiday.